Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I am reading Booktuber's Best Books of 2023. This video has been a journey to make for me because the original plan that I had is not what this video is turning out to be, but I'm really hoping that y'all enjoy it anyways. My edition of this, because there's a lot of different people who do this lots of different ways. I know my friend Kayla, she does it where she chooses people that has like the most amount of books in common with her and chooses one of their favorites to read. And then I know that other people will search through 200, 300, all of the best books of the year videos and then find the most common books that are amongst those videos, the ones that repeat the most that they have not read, and read those. For me, I chose 20 booktubers that I really love, and I will have all of them linked down below. I won't be talking about all of them because some of them are not going to really be part of the books that I'm choosing, but basically I chose 20 booktubers that I really love, and I went through their videos, and the books that overlap the most in their videos are the ones that I'm choosing. I'm reading 3 books for this, and then on my Patreon there's going to be an extended version. There was actually 4 books on here that had 3 people say that they were their favorites of the year, but one of them I had to take off of this list because it was published under St. Martin's Press, which, if you don't know, there is a boycott going on for St. Martin's currently, so I will have a link down below where you can basically learn more about the actual boycott itself, and that information will be down below for you. But I chose 3 books to read for this reading vlog, and then Patreon is going to be getting that extended version where I read some of the other books. And so the very first book is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which was liked by Kayla, Riley, and also Alexandra. So I will be reading this one. And then also with 3 is Fourth Wing, which was liked by Sid, Tori, and Crystal. And lastly, Project Hail Mary, which was liked by Aspen, Rachel, and Sarah. So those are the 3 books that I will be reading throughout this vlog. I hope that this is a good idea and concept that y'all enjoy. And then on Patreon, I'll be reading some of the books that only had 2 people who liked them. I've already read Butcher and Blackbird, and Everyone in My Family Has Killed Somebody, so those 2 will definitely be in that extended reading vlog that'll be over on Patreon if you would like to head over there. I'm really excited for this reading vlog, so let's hop straight into the first book.
Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is the first in a light, cozy fantasy series where you're following Emily, who is a professor, and she's building this encyclopedia of fairy lore.
I just feel like this is a combination of so many of my favorite things. This series is following Emily Wilde, who is a scientist, academic, and she is studying fairies and writing the first ever encyclopedia of fairies. And so she travels to this Scandinavian village where she's going to be studying fair folk there, and her co-worker, academic rival, Bamblebee, shows up, and they have a very slow burn romance. I said in my review for this was that it is as if Veronica Speedwell had a romance with Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, written by Holly Black. That is the vibes of this series.
This is a cozy fantasy, it's adult, and it does have some romance elements, and this was such a delight. This is actually a book that I read with my Patreon members, and we collectively love it so much.
I just loved how established of a character she was, how well we got to know her. She is not the most charming person or personable individual, so when she goes to meet and learn from these townspeople about their local fairies, they don't really want to interact with her. But then swoops in a colleague of hers who she doesn't get along with, Wendell, and his charm works on everyone except Emily, but they end up working together for common goals. They go on these little adventures together. They're solving mysteries, getting into trouble, all in the name of research. Emily is so determined to learn about the fairies that she will get into kind of any situation. Emily and Wendell are my favorite, not quite a couple, romantic pair to follow, and I loved this so much.
So I liked this because Emily isn't necessarily like a traditional heroine. She's coming at learning about the Fae from a very academic standpoint, which I thought was really interesting and a really cool take. I particularly enjoyed her banter with her arch nemesis, whose name was Wendell. I love Wendell's perspective as well, because Wendell does not think that they are enemies. He thinks that they are besties, and that was really fun to to read about. I loved the narration of this. I loved the tone of this. I love the style of this. I just enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was cozy. I thought it was cute. I thought it was really, really funny. But also, I just liked how fresh and unique it felt.
Sorry if you hear my computer. She's like working in overtime or something. I don't know what's going on with her. But I'm about halfway through with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I'm loving this one so much. This one literally follows Emily Wilde, and this takes place in the early 1900s, and she is a scholar of fairies. She is working on an encyclopedia. She's been working on it for like 7 years, and she is going to the last place that she has to visit to study those fairies to make the last chapter of her book. And so I think she's writing more in like a diary, because she's talking about her everyday life, and she's making like little entries with even footnotes and stuff like that, which are really interesting about what's going on and what's happening, and about the fairies and about the community that she's in and her making friends there. And there's another professor, because Emily is a professor at Cambridge, and he also works there, and his name is Wendell Bambleby, and he is like thinks that him and Emily are like best friends, but Emily sees him as kind of like her nemesis, because he gets a lot of things that she doesn't, because he's a man, but also just like she's not really good at people and people related things. But she also recognizes that he is basically her only friend, but they start to have kind of like a budding romance where her feelings of kind of like disdain towards him start to migrate more towards friendliness, because he is like, okay, Emily, like, you are going off on this adventure by yourself in a place that you don't know. I don't think that you should be doing that. Not because she's a woman or anything like that, but just because like I think that he thinks that like regardless of who you are, going alone into a place that you don't know is kind of dangerous. So he joins her eventually. Like, she goes first and then he comes afterwards to be with her, and they are basically smashed together and have to spend time together, and her feelings start to develop, and it is a budding romance. I don't think by the end of the book they're like together or anything like that, because I know there's a sequel to this book, but I do know that they do start to have some romantic feelings towards each other, so I'm excited to see how that is developing. But this is definitely cozy fantasy at its finest. I would put this in the same level of Legends and Lattes for sure, but I think I'm enjoying this one a bit more than Legends and Lattes, because I think I give that one 4 stars. I really enjoyed that one as well, and I think I enjoy cozy fantasy a lot, because the politics and the world building and all that can be a lot for my little tiny pea brain. But something like this, where it's like a little bit of magic, a little bit of something, but it's like cozy, so we're not dealing with politics or high stakes or anything like that, is kind of like easier for me to digest. So I'm really enjoying this one a lot. I'm enjoying Emily. She's very relatable. She loves her books, she loves her dog, she loves fairies, and she loves just studying. She loves what she does, and I just think that is so like amazing. And like, she was ahead of her time, because as I said, this takes place in the early 1900s, and she is definitely like talking about how she's a woman in a field where most people are not women, and how that impacts her. And I'm also really enjoying like this small town, and her like starting to understand people more and make these friendships and everything like that. But then also she is starting to discover some darker fae magic. And the thing about fairies in this book, for the most part, these fairies are like not humanoid. Like, we think of fae and fairies now as like these really sexy like creatures that are like Sarah J Maas kind of fae, but in here for the most part they're actually like little fairies, or like more like magical. Like, they don't really have like specific organization to them. Like, they don't have like courts and things like that, but some of them do, so it kind of depends. There's a wide range of fairies, so I find that very fascinating and interesting, like learning about them. And I feel like I'm becoming an expert on these literal fictional fairies, but I think that you could tell that Heather Fawcett, I think is who wrote this one, she did a lot of research on like fae mythology, because it's really like deeply woven into the story. But she's also starting to discover some darker fae magic, and it is very interesting. So as I said, I'm about halfway through, and I have about half left to go. I don't know if I'm going to finish it today, but I'm going to make some more progress in it tonight, and I will come back to y'all when I finish it up. So I finished Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I'm giving this one 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it a lot because of Emily and Wendell specifically. They have such a cute relationship, and Emily's very like cold type A, which is not me. I'm type A, but I'm not really like cold. I'm a very emotional person, so I don't really relate to her on that sense. But there's a lot about her that I find very interesting as a character that I really enjoyed, and a lot of people also are convinced that she's neurodivergent, which I could definitely see that, and I'm also neurodivergent, so I see kind of like a lot of those elements, and I was able to relate to her even though we are very different. But I know the author has not wanted to place Emily in that kind of box just because she is so cold, and there is that stereotype that people who are neurodivergent are so cold. So it's kind of like up to debate. And Wendell, he is just like this little cinnamon roll, little love bug, and I just adored him so much, and their banter was phenomenal. This is not a romance in the way that there's not a happily ever after, and for something to be considered a romance there has to be a happily ever after, and there probably will be by the end of the series, but not by the end of the first book. So I'm just letting you guys know that now. But I really enjoyed their banter, and I enjoyed the romantic elements that were woven into the story. And this is definitely like a cozy fantasy, but it has kind of some more action-packedness in the second half that I wasn't anticipating, but I really enjoyed it regardless. It reminded me a lot of some elements of books that I really enjoy, but it was done in more of like a cozy way, because you know the stakes are never that high just because the journal/diary entries that we're getting, sorry the screen just went white on my TV, the journal/diary entries that we are getting take place after the fact, and we know that. So we know that everybody's going to come out of every situation completely fine and okay, and everything is just not high stakes at all. But this one has also a lot of found family elements in it that I was really enjoying. I thought they were done so well, and I just love found family so much. I didn't give this one a full 5-star because it just didn't have necessarily a 5-star feeling for me. I'm trying to be more selective with what I'm giving 5 stars. I want it to be books that I want it to be books that I'm absolutely obsessed with, that are like my new personality, and this one was just not that. But I think maybe on a reread it could be, or over time it could develop into that, because I definitely do have that happen where there are books that I read them and they don't seem like a 5-star read, but they really stick with me and they stay in my mind, and I bump them up to 5 stars. But I feel like for me, the reason why this wasn't a 5-star is just because there was a lot of side characters that were important to the story that added to the found family element to the story, and I feel like I didn't really get to know the characters that well, and not that that's the fault of the book. I think it was more my own issue of me just not really like paying attention necessarily to the side characters. They just didn't really stand out to me necessarily, but I think if I reread the book that they would stand out more, because I think the book definitely was good at describing them. It was more of like me as a reader not paying attention and like basically like making a character chart in my head of all the characters. I didn't do that in my head, but I think if I was more cognizant of it on a second read, that I would pay more attention to those side characters and be more aware of them. And I also really enjoyed the writing style in this because it is so like sciencey based. I love a science book. One of my favorite horror books, Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant, that one is very science heavy, very technical, and for some reason that book just really works for me and I love it. And I really enjoyed kind of the scientific academic lens that this book was kind of told from. We have footnotes and everything like that, so it did kind of feel like, even though it was journal diary entries, that it still kind of had like this academic lens to it that I really was enjoying a lot. So overall, those are my thoughts on the book. I really enjoyed it. This one was definitely a win for me. So far the booktubers are doing very, very well with their favorite books of the year, because I really enjoyed this one a lot. And as I said, eventually it could bump up to a 5-star depending on how much it actually sticks in my brain, but I really enjoyed this one a lot, and I'm excited to read the next book to see if the trend is going to continue.
Next up we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I think this is probably going to be on a lot of people's lists for their favorite books in 2023. This book is just incredible. It is so fun. It takes you on just like an epic adventure. Essentially, this book is about Violet, who ends up going to a war college to be a scribe. She wants to be surrounded by books and writing and be in the library. That's like where she is comfortable. But her mom, who is basically like the headmaster of the school, forces her to go be in the writer's quadrant, which is a very high stakes quadrant to be in at the war college that they're in. So they have to go through all these physical challenges in order to make it through. And at the end, their ultimate goal is to bond with a dragon and become a dragon rider.
Just the way that Rebecca Yarros wrote this, I had such a fun time reading this book, and it's been a while since I read a fantasy romance where we dive into the action, you just jump right into everything. You have this female character that is so strong. And I will say, I think I connect with this book a lot more than some people because our female character has a chronic illness. And so she's struggling with that literally throughout the whole book, an entire flame. So I think that's why I connected with her so much. And I don't know, just the way that Rebecca Yarros wrote that, it just really resonated with me. Like I said, this is a very fun YA, borderline, I would say like new adult fantasy romance. I love Xaden. I love the college. I love the kind of world that she started to create in this book. So yes, it is a 5-star read for me. Yes, I had a really fun time. Yes, I would recommend.
I had the time of my life. It was so much fun, so action-packed. This world is really interesting. I love a lot of the characters and how the storyline progressed in this book. So it didn't quite make it in my top 10, but I still did really, really love my experience reading this book.
Everything about this book, I just absolutely loved. The writing is amazing. The characters are incredible. Oh my gosh, the dragons in this book are so fun. They all have their own little personalities. The banter in this is funny. The romance and the spice is so good. Xaden is one of my favorite male characters in any book. I also feel like this book was very easy to understand. It was very easy to follow. It didn't have a ton of world building and a ton of complicated politics. It does have some, of course, it's a fantasy book. There's gonna be those elements in a fantasy. But to me, they were very easy to understand, very easy to follow. I never found myself getting confused. If you have not read this, I'm telling you, please read it. And even if you are not a fantasy reader, I just would highly, highly recommend that everyone reads this book. It is so good.
So the next book I decided to read will come to a surprise to a lot of people. Not a surprise that it's in this video, but a surprise that I'm reading it, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Of course, this is going to be on this video, on this list, because this was literally the most popular book of the Goodreads Choice Awards. It had like 400,000 views. It had like 400,000 votes. It has 1.1 million reviews / ratings on Goodreads. So this book is very popular. So I'm not surprised with just the sheer amount of people that read it that it ended up on people's favorites list. I will say, let me pull it up really quickly. This book was on Tori from A Novel Life's list, Sid from Sid Bookworm, and Crystal Lauren's lists. They all had this book in their favorites of the year, and as I said, I'm about halfway through this book, a little over halfway, I think, and I'm enjoying it so far. I am feeling more of like a 4-star vibe than a 5-star vibe, and y'all know that I don't really read like high fantasy like this. I feel like this is so high. I don't really read high fantasy like that. I read mostly like cozy fantasy or lower fantasy, like easier fantasy to digest than this, but this is a romantasy, so it is fantasy, but it does have like a romantic element to it, and so far I haven't gotten too much into the romance, but this was obviously the winner of the romantasy category, so it has a lot of romance in it, because to be a fantasy romance you have to have a lot of romance in it, and so far it hasn't happened that much in the book, a little inkling, but I'm expecting more in the second half. And as I said, I don't really read fantasy that much, so I feel like I'm gonna be really bad at describing this, so I'm gonna have the synopsis here in front of me just in case. But we follow 20-year-old Violet, and she was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant. There are different quadrants within this like world, I guess, or more like within this government / like organization, country, I don't know exactly what it's called, but she was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant just like her father, but her mother is actually a commanding general who is like tough as nails, or as it says here, tough as talons, because this is a dragon book, and her mother forces her to enter into the writer quadrant. So she is forced to join the hundreds of candidates arriving to become the elite of this like country, and they are dragon riders. But she is very much smaller than everybody else, and her body's much more frail. Her bones easily break, her joints and stuff, she has problems with them. So I really haven't been enjoying that, because I feel like it's kind of like this book's version of representation for like chronic pain, and so she's very much like more fragile than everybody else, and she is kind of like, the dragons aren't going to want to accept her because she is so fragile and she doesn't think that she's going to survive. And so this is very cutthroat from the very beginning because they are thrown into conscription, which I can't even describe to you what conscription exactly is, but they are going through a lot of different trials and training. The way that I imagined it in my head is very much giving like Dauntless vibes from Divergent, if you know what I'm talking about, how they're just like supposed to jump off stuff, go on these trains, and they are like training and fighting each other. It's very much giving that. So yeah, and people who are within the same like wing as you are not supposed to kill you, but other people can kill you. It can easily fall and die and just like kaput. So there's a lot of different like dangers, and it's very cutthroat. And there are few dragons that are willing to bond with these cadets, but that does eventually happen where our main characters do bond to dragons. That happened about halfway through the book, a little less than halfway through the book. But there's also this guy, Xaden, and she was told to look out for him by her sister, who's also a dragon rider, because he is basically like, his father or his parents were part of a rebellion, and her mother, the general, basically executed them. So he kind of has a vendetta against their family, but for one reason or another they are bonded together as well, and they eventually have to look after each other because of certain circumstances that I don't want to get too much into because I don't want to spoil, but they do kind of have a bond. But in the beginning, before this, they know about this, they do hate each other a lot, and they still kind of hate each other, but they have to look out for each other. And I feel like it's not a spoiler to say that the budding romance is with him. I don't know that for a fact because I am not super far into the book, but I'm pretty sure it's with him because she had like another love interest in the beginning. His name was Dane, and that was her childhood best friend who also entered the Dragon Riders right before she did. So I think like a year or two before her, I think a year before her, he entered into it. And when you are in your first year, you can't communicate with anybody from your family or from the outside world. So they didn't have any communication, and she always kind of wanted him, but once they kind of like kissed and kind of had some stuff going on, she was like, nah, I'm actually not interested in him, which I was glad because I'm not a huge fan of him. I just don't really get the vibes. Like, he is just not really for me as a character, and I really enjoy Xaden. I think that he's very interesting and a dynamic, complex character. There's also a lot of side characters throughout this story, but a lot of them do die because this is so cutthroat. Nobody is safe. So I really enjoy that. And our main character, at first, I really didn't like her because I was like, she's giving pick me, she's giving special, she's giving Harry Potter, and like, I'm not a huge like fan of like pick me girls, and I feel like that's like a lot in fantasy, is just like pick me girls, and I feel like she's kind of like that, but also not. I don't think she wants to be a pick-me girl. She just happens to have fallen into certain circumstances. She much rather would have entered the scribe quadrant and lived a cozy, quiet life, but she was kind of forced into these circumstances, and I do kind of relate to her. Like, I'm very short. My body has a lot of different issues with it as well, so I very much relate to her in that kind of circumstance. I do kind of think that she is giving slight pick-me still, which is not my favorite, but I'm hoping throughout the rest of the book we get more of her like character development. And the dragons don't really come in till about halfway through the book as well, when the bonding occurs, but I'm really enjoying the dragons so far. There is a lot of dialogue throughout this book, even with the dragons, because the dragons speak in our main character's head, and you can only the only dragons that can speak in your head are the ones that are bonded to you, but the ones that we do get dialogue from, I'm really enjoying, and they really become like main characters in the story once they actually come into the story. So I'm enjoying it so far. As I said, it's giving more 4-star than 5-star to me, but we'll see how the second half is, because the second half could be blow my mind out the water, and then this book would be like a 5-star for me. And this book has a super high rating on Goodreads. It has like a 4.6, which I've never seen that high, especially for a book that has this many ratings. So there has to be something to it. I don't know. I don't really understand the people who hate on this book so much, because I feel like it's like not bad at all. It's not the best thing I've ever read. Is the writing phenomenal? No. But is the writing bad? No. Like, I've definitely read worse, and I've definitely read worse characterization. I feel like this is definitely not a bad book, so I don't understand those people who give this book 1 star and just hate on it all the time consistently. They're giving pick me. I'm not gonna lie to you. But I'm enjoying it so far. That's all that I really have to say, and I will come back to y'all once I finish this up, which I'm hoping to do today so I can like get on with this video. This was the book that's gonna take me the longest out of all of them. There's a couple other ones, but like of the top 3, this is the one that's gonna take the longest. So I'm hoping to finish it off today, but I don't know if I actually will, but I'm gonna try. Guys, it is literally freezing outside. Like this morning when I was supposed to go to class, it was literally freezing, which is why I didn't go to class, because it was literally freezing. And I know some of y'all literally live in places where it's snowing permanently and it's really, really cold, but for us, anything below freezing is very chilly. It's unusual. It was like 18 degrees this morning Fahrenheit in North Carolina. Ridiculous. I mean, sometimes we get a little snow, sometimes we get a little this, a little that, but it's just jarring. It's very jarring for us. Anyways, enough of that. I ended up finishing Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and this one I decided I'm going to give 4 stars. I was actually going to give it 3.5 stars, but there was a death at the end that like really emotionally hit me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to raise the rating to a 4 star because I enjoyed the romance. I don't think it was anything crazy. It wasn't anything like, they're not like an OTP or anything for me. Like, I'm not thinking about them. They're not going to be living in my head rent free, but I definitely enjoyed them. I related to the main character on a lot of different things, but I also thought she was very annoying, which, you know, maybe I'm also annoying. Maybe I just relate to her a lot and we're both annoying, but I found her pretty annoying and kind of like a Mary Sue and a little bit of a pick-me. So there was a little bit of that, but I feel like that happens a lot in fantasy, specifically like fantasy romance and just fantasy in general. Like, even like, as I said earlier, I think Harry Potter to me is a pick-me, okay? Like, in a way that like they're like, oh, like, don't pick me, don't choose me, but like low-key pick me, choose me. And the writing was fine to me. I know a lot of people complain about the writing. I didn't mind the writing. There was a lot of dialogue, which I enjoy. So I thought the book was overall a fun time. It was good, but it wasn't anything super unique. It wasn't anything completely new. It wasn't anything that different. I don't think I've read a book specifically about dragons before. I've read books with dragons in it, but not like as main characters. So I really enjoyed that they were main characters in the book. And as I said, it was just a really fun time and overall a good read, but it wasn't anything to like write home about for me. I know a lot of y'all love it. A lot of y'all ride or die for it. A lot of y'all enjoy her immensely. But for me, she was a 4 star. She was a good time. She was a fun time, but she wasn't anything that is going to be like living my head rent free, as I said. So yeah, overall a 4 star for Fourth Wing.
All right, you guys, we have made it. My #1 favorite book of 2023. I have a feeling you probably know what it is because I talked about it like 700 times this year. But my favorite book that I read in 2023 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I cannot believe that my best book of the year came from me doing a reading vlog challenge where I read books out of my comfort zone. That is why I picked this book up. I was like, I'm gonna step away from fantasy and fantasy romance. I'm gonna read some different books, some books that I might not normally be drawn to. And I was drawn to one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I love Andy Weir's writing so much. He is so funny. He creates so much heart with his characters, but then also creates these amazingly complex plot lines, and they're just so full of action and adventure. And I had so much fun reading this book.
This book follows a man who wakes up on a spaceship and he has no memory of who he is, why he is on the spaceship, where he's going. Like, he just has no memories really whatsoever. He has to basically just like try to survive and figure out what's going on, figure out who he is, where he's going, what he's gotta do. Andy Weir, this is my 2nd book from him. I've read The Martian. I read it years ago, but I love that book. I love the movie. I desperately hope Project Hail Mary gets made into a movie. He just writes the most wholesome, characters in the midst of like the craziest scenarios. His characters are so witty and enjoyable to read from. I just love his characters so much. And then the stories that he tells, like the actual plot behind his stories is so engaging on top of that. And especially in Project Hail Mary, there is an added element that I can't tell you because it's a spoiler.
Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This was a huge surprise to me. I did not know that I was going to love this so much. This is a sci-fi book about a guy who wakes up on a spaceship, but he has no memories. He's like, why am I here? And so he has to sort of parse together what he's doing on the spaceship. This is definitely one of those books that you want to go in not knowing a lot, so I can't really say much more about the plot, but what I need you to know is that one of the characters in this book is literally one of my favorite characters of all time. I would literally die for them, and it's very, very heavily steeped in science. I don't know if the science holds water, like I don't know math or science things, but there's a lot of science going on in here, but the way that it's written is very approachable, and so I just really enjoyed the way that everything was approached in this. Like I never felt myself getting bored, even when the main character was describing like math problems. I was like having a good time. If you're like me and you stayed away from reading this because Andy Weir gives like weird dude bro energy, I get it, but I think you should give it a try because it is very wholesome and I really, really enjoyed it, and I was smiling and giggling and I was so happy while I was reading this, and it's just a really, really good book. I also cried a little bit. It's a good time.
I love these characters. You guys know I have said a million times I will always die for Rocky. He is everything to me, and I loved seeing the friendship dynamic that blossomed in this book. Truly so well done. Truly just such a joyous book. This book, and particularly the audiobook, is such a memorable reading experience for me, and I will truly think about this book forever. I definitely want to reread this book like for the rest of my life. It is the book that I think I push on the most people. Like once again, I don't care what your reading tastes are. Please listen to the audiobook for Project Hail Mary and live your best life. This book has really, really bewitched me body and soul. I just think that this is like, once again, such a perfect book, so much fun, such an amazing reading experience. This book is why I love being a reader. This book really represents that for me and is 100% my best book of 2023.
It is one of the most heartwarming things I've ever read in my life. Like I sat with the biggest, dumbest smile on my face reading this book because of this added element. I highly recommend getting the audiobook for this one because it adds something that you can't get reading the physical book. Like you physically, literally cannot have it without the audio. Like just reading the words on paper, you can't. I highly recommend getting the audio to add that extra element because it really heightens the story, but I just have such fond feelings over this book. I think about it, again, super often just because it makes me happy. Like I just sit here and I just let a smile thinking about it. I want to reread it.
Hi guys, so I ended up starting Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is the last book for this reading vlog. I am about 50% of the way in and I'm enjoying this one so far. We follow our main character Ryland. I didn't even know his name, Ryland, but I didn't know his last name is Grace, and he is the sole survivor of this mission into space because there's this thing called astrophage, which is basically this alien microbe that is like algae-like and it grows on stars, and when it grows on stars it like depletes the temperature and the rays and everything like that. So this is happening to the sun on, like, for our Earth, our sun. And so it is causing the opposite of global warming, global cooling, basically. And there's nothing that we can really do about it, except they believe that this man, Ryland, who is literally a, like, middle school science teacher or something like that, they believe that he is the one that's going to be able to solve this. But the big issue with this is that Ryland has woken up with barely any memory. He doesn't remember what's going on, and everybody else that was on this crew with him is dead. They're basically mummified. There's like two other people, and they were both dead. So he is out here alone with barely any memory, not remembering. He woke up from a coma, and so he's like, what do I do? He's trying to figure out why he's there, how he got there, and what's the purpose of his mission even in the first place. But we definitely get flashbacks. We get like dual timeline where we get flashbacks to when he was on Earth. So we can also discover along with him like what is going on. And as he's discovering it in real time, in real life, and they are saying like And in the synopsis, you can see it says, and with the clock ticking down and the nearest human being light years away, he's got to do it all alone, or does he? And that just kind of gives you a hint. I never have heard anybody talk about like what this book really is. Like now that I'm into it, I know what it is. I never hear anybody talk about it because it's kind of spoilery, so I'm not going to get into that, but you can kind of gather it from, or does he? You know what I'm saying? Like, does he have to do it alone? I don't know. I'm enjoying it so far. I think that the writing is really, really good. I think that Andy Weir definitely has a humorous way of writing, and it's very sciencey, which I like, but I feel like it's not dumbed down at all, but it's still digestible. Not that I'm saying that I understand what's going on, because half the time I'm like, what even is going on? Because they're talking very sciencey, but it does feel like we're genuinely in the brain of this man, and we are like processing along with him, which I'm enjoying, because I enjoy being in the minds of other people. To be honest, I didn't think it was going to be a straight cis white man, but even he is like, I'm a straight white man, like like even the character is self-aware, which I'm enjoying. So I am liking it so far. It's very sciencey, and now that we've gotten kind of to like the meat and potatoes of the story, I'm starting to enjoy it more. We just kind of got here probably like between a third and halfway into the story, so I'm really excited to see how the second half of this book goes. So I may look familiar from the intro because I've already filmed the intro in the same exact setup, but I ended up finishing Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I'm giving this one 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I don't think I loved it as much as other people. I enjoyed this idea throughout the story. The main theme of the story is basically like people who are very different can still connect and have a beautiful, wonderful relationship. So to wrap up this reading vlog, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I gave 4.5 stars. Then I read Fourth Wing, which I gave 4 stars, and then I read Project Hail Mary, which I ended up giving 3.5 stars. So overall, I enjoyed all the books in this reading vlog, and I think that BookTube and my friends have pretty good taste. So I'm really excited that I actually had some wins throughout this video, and it wasn't like I just hated people's favorite books. As I said, there's going to be an extended version over on my Patreon if you would like to watch that, or, you know, participate in live shows, have a book club with me, chat with me in Discord, get extra exclusive content like this going forward. I would love to have you over there on Patreon. But that's all that I have for this video today. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you made it to the end, leave a little fairy emoji down below, and I will see y'all on my next one. Bye, everybody.